Chapter 1. The moment Grace was released from confinement, she went straight to the colonel's office to submit her project application. "You've thought it through? You're agreeing to go?" the colonel asked, his voice tinged with surprise. "Yes, Colonel. I've made up my mind," Grace replied calmly. The colonel had approached her before about a highly classified military research project, urging her to participate. He had told her that she was an exceptional, hands-on research talent, and that it would be a waste of her skills if she didn't join the project. He even suggested she discuss it with Derek and get his support. She had been hesitant until 3 days ago, when her husband had personally locked her in the confinement room, simply because she had confronted him about his relationship with another woman. That incident solidified her decision. The colonel raised his eyes to meet hers. "What about Derek? Did he agree to this?" Grace's voice remained steady. "I've decided to divorce him." 3 years ago, she had given up a promotion opportunity to be with Derek, transitioning from a frontline position to a desk job. Back then, her superiors had advised against it, her parents had disapproved, and her colleagues had tried to dissuade her. But she ignored them all, throwing caution to the wind and sacrificing her career for love. Unfortunately, Derek had betrayed her unwavering devotion. For 3 years, she had suppressed her ambitions for the sake of love. This time, she wouldn't give up her dreams for anyone. The colonel hesitated before asking, "Is this because of Derek and Vivian?" The rumors about Derek and Vivian had been spreading like wildfire, and the colonel had heard them too. "It is," Grace admitted, her voice trembling slightly though she tried to sound indifferent. "A man whose heart isn't with me isn't worth holding on to. I'll find a way to get him to sign the divorce papers," she added. "If he refuses, since he's the one at fault for committing adultery, I'll need your help to push through a forced divorce." "Understood," the colonel nodded. "You leave in 13 days. Use this time to wrap up your affairs and make arrangements at home." "Got it," Grace replied. As she left the colonel's office, Grace felt a weight lifted off her shoulders. Outside, the sky was overcast, and rain began to fall steadily. She stood under the eaves waiting for the rain to stop before heading home. When she lifted her head unintentionally, she saw a familiar trio not far away, a man, a woman, and a child. It was Derek, Vivian, and her son Tommy. Derek held Tommy in one arm and an umbrella in the other, while Vivian walked beside him, her face radiating tenderness. Their voices drifted over on the wind. "Derek, move the umbrella closer to you. Your shoulder's getting wet," Vivian said gently. "I'm fine. Just make sure you don't get wet. You're more delicate, catching a cold wouldn't be good," Derek replied. His usually stern voice softened with care, almost unrecognizably tender. Grace had never heard him speak to her like that. When they were together, his tone was either neutral or cold. She had assumed he wasn't the type to be soft-spoken, but now she realized he could be, just not with her. Her chest tightened painfully. "Derek, it's the day Grace gets out of confinement. Are you sure you're not going to pick her up?" Vivian asked, her concern evident. "It's fine. She needs time to reflect on her actions." Derek's voice cooled at the mention of Grace, tinged with impatience. "But what if she causes a scene?" Vivian asked, worry creasing her brow. "She won't dare," Derek replied curtly. "Enough about her. Let's not ruin the mood. Let's get back home before the little one gets cold." "All right, whatever you say," Vivian agreed, her tone obedient. As they walked away, their figures disappearing into the distance, Grace remained under the eaves, frozen in place, her entire body chilled. She had once believed that her marriage to Derek was a union built on mutual affection. She now realized that, in Derek's eyes, she was nothing more than an inconvenience. Vivian was his ideal, the woman he had cherished all along. Grace was merely his reluctant choice when the time came for him to marry. At least now she was leaving. Grace managed a smile, though it looked more like a grimace. She braved the rain on her way home. Once there, she boiled water for a bath, hoping it might wash away some of the day's bitterness. But before she could step into the tub, she heard movement at the door. A shadow loomed over her, and a familiar, icy voice rang out. "You're back. How long have you been here? Have you eaten?" In the past, Grace had found Derek's cold, distant tone oddly appealing, aloof and dignified. But now, after hearing him speak so tenderly to Vivian, that same tone grated on her nerves, feeling insincere and tiresome. Suppressing her emotions, she replied flatly, "A little while. Haven't eaten yet. Why didn't you make something for yourself?" "Not hungry," Derek asked, sounding surprised. "After being locked up for days, I felt disgusting. A bath seemed more important," Grace responded, her tone calm. "Gracie," Derek said, his voice low as he stepped closer. He reached out, pulling her to her feet and forcing her to look him in the eye. "You're still upset with me, aren't you? Angry that I had you confined?" he asked, his brows furrowed and his expression stern. "Shouldn't I blame you for putting me under house arrest? In the military, only soldiers who have committed serious offenses are confined. Tell me, what grave mistake did I make that warranted Colonel Derek personally ordering my confinement? Was it because, as a wife, I publicly questioned my husband about his relationship with another woman? About why he was so close to her?" Grace's expression was calm, her eyes filled with indifference as she asked. Derek looked at the apathy in Grace's eyes, and for some inexplicable reason, his heart tightened. From the day they got married until now, whenever Grace looked at him, her eyes were always full of love and stars. She had never hidden the affection and admiration she felt for him. But this was the first time since their marriage that she looked at him with such detachment. And he hated it. The thought unsettled Derek. Instinctively, he tightened his grip on her hand and said coldly, "Do you think you're blameless? Vivian's husband is dead. Now she's alone, raising a child by herself. Life is already hard enough for her, and you want to tarnish her reputation? How is she supposed to live after that? Her husband was our comrade. He died in the line of duty. What's wrong with me taking extra care of her? Gracie, you weren't this petty and calculating before." Grace almost laughed. So, a wife questioning her husband is considered petty and calculating? She chose not to argue further with Derek. Instead, she said calmly, "Let's get a divorce." Derek's face filled with disbelief and he barked, "Stop being unreasonable." Grace looked up at him, her voice steady yet firm. "Derek, let's get a divorce. Once we're divorced, you can take care of Vivian and her child all you want. I won't interfere in the slightest anymore." Enough. Stop being ridiculous." Derek cut her off, his frustration evident. "I've told you there's nothing between Vivian and me. I'm only helping her out of loyalty to a fallen comrade. Why do you insist on making this an issue?" he said angrily. Grace almost laughed out loud at his audacious rebuttal, but before she could say anything, there was a knock on the door. Chapter 2. "Derek, are you home? Tommy has a fever and is delirious. I'm scared. Can you come help me?" Vivian's voice was soft, frail, and full of helplessness, as though she might shatter at any moment. The moment Derek heard her, he panicked. He immediately tossed out a curt, "Tommy's in trouble, I need to check on him. Stop being unreasonable. And I don't want to hear any more talk about divorce." With that, Derek rushed out the door. "What happened?" "He seemed fine when I last saw him," Derek asked anxiously. "I don't know either. Maybe it's because the weather suddenly changed. He started running a fever late at night, and it hasn't gone down," Vivian whimpered tearfully. "Derek, Tommy's not going to be okay, is he? I'm so scared," she said, her voice trembling. "He'll be fine, don't worry. Come on, let's go check on him," Derek reassured her. Grace stood in the open doorway, watching the two of them disappear into the rain. Vivian, as if sensing Grace's gaze, turned back and glanced at her. In her eyes was a look of disdain and triumph, a victor mocking the defeated. Though Grace had long known what kind of man Derek truly was, being so blatantly abandoned by him still stung. Her chest tightened with a dull ache. Closing the door, she tidied up after herself and went to bed. The next morning, Derek was nowhere to be seen. When she asked around, she found out he had gone on assignment and wouldn't be back for 5 days. With him gone, the matter of divorce couldn't be discussed. So, Grace began packing her belongings. She sent some of her essentials back to her family home, while the rest, items she no longer needed, she gave to her neighbors, the other military wives. "Star, these things are practically brand new. Why don't you want them anymore?" Nancy, the neighbor from next door, exclaimed as she held the items Grace had given her. "I just don't need them anymore, so I'm clearing them out," Grace replied with a faint smile. "If you don't mind that they're used, keep them. If not, feel free to share them with others who might need them," she added. "Of course I'll keep them. These things are wonderful. How could I complain?" Nancy said quickly, grateful. "All right then, I'll leave you to it. I need to head back," Grace said, nodding politely. Nancy hesitated, then bit her lip and spoke softly. "Star, don't take this the wrong way, but a woman's husband is something she needs to keep an eye on. You've heard the rumors about Derek and Vivian, haven't you? Those sorts of things don't come out of nowhere. Why, just the other day, I saw Derek carrying her in his arms. She said she sprained her ankle, but no matter how bad it was in broad daylight, a married man, a senior officer no less, shouldn't be carrying another woman like that. Don't you agree? Derek's a young colonel already. His future is bright. You can't let some sly woman steal him away," Nancy cautioned. Grace felt a moment of daze as she listened. She remembered a time when she had twisted her ankle and playfully asked Derek to carry her to the infirmary. He had refused, saying they were in public and that it would look improper. No matter how much she insisted, he wouldn't budge. In the end, it was him who helped her walk, while she endured the pain and took a considerable amount of time to make her way to the clinic on her own. Back then, he had even complained about how slow she was, how she was wasting his time, as if her pain didn't matter to him in the slightest. She had always thought he was rigid and uncompromising, incapable of showing tenderness. But later, she realized that his so-called principles only applied to her. He could be tender and caring, just not with her. Love and indifference. He had made it so obvious all along, yet she had been too blind, too foolish to see it. Grace let out a bitter laugh in her heart, though her face remained calm. She nodded with a faint smile and said, "All right, I understand. Thank you for telling me this, Nancy." After bidding Nancy goodbye, Grace returned home. Most of her belongings were already packed. The house looked bare and hollow even. Her eyes fell on the calendar hanging on the wall. Grace walked over, circled the date of her planned departure, and crossed out today's date with a sharp X. Just 7 more days, and she could finally leave this place for good. That evening, Derek came home. When he arrived, Grace was having dinner. "I'm back," Derek announced as he walked in. "Oh, you're eating." Grace responded without lifting her head, her tone light and indifferent. Derek went to wash his hands and then sat down at the table. "Gracie, get me some food." He said it so naturally, as if it were her duty, as if of course she should serve him. Grace's expression remained unchanged as she replied coolly, "I didn't make anything for you. If you're hungry, go cook yourself some noodles in the kitchen. Why didn't you make my dinner?" "Gracie, are you still mad at me? Didn't I already explain it to you? Why are you being so unreasonable?" Derek frowned and immediately launched into a tirade. Grace's tone stayed calm. "You didn't tell me you'd be home today. Why should I have cooked for you? Cooking extra would have just wasted food, wouldn't it? And there aren't any dogs to feed here, are there?" Derek felt the sting of her jab, even if she hadn't raised her voice. Ignoring his reaction, Grace picked up her empty bowl and plate and headed to the kitchen to wash up. Derek followed her. Gracie, I misunderstood you earlier. I'm sorry, okay? Don't take it to heart. Since you didn't make my dinner, can you at least cook me some noodles? I'm really hungry, he pleaded. I'm tired. Do it yourself. Grace placed the washed dishes on the drying rack and turned to leave the kitchen. Derek's brows furrowed as he grabbed her wrist. Gracie, why are you like this? Are you still mad at me? What did I do? Is asking you to cook your own noodles some kind of crime? Have I broken the law? Am I suddenly a criminal now? Guilty of some heinous offense? Grace asked coldly, her voice laced with sarcasm. Derek pressed his lips together. That's not what I meant. But her indifference, her detachment, it was so unlike the woman he used to know. It unnerved him, gave him a sinking feeling, as if she were slipping through his fingers. Then let go. I'm tired and I need to rest, Grace said flatly. Derek looked at her impassive face, and a sharp needle-like pain pierced his heart. Why was she treating him like this? So cold, so distant? Could it be that she really wanted a divorce? That she no longer wanted him? No, impossible. She had given up her career to be with him, severed ties with her family, and spent the years since their marriage tending to him with unwavering devotion. Her world had revolved around him. She loved him. She had to. There was no way she would just walk away from him. She must have been upset about how well he had treated Vivian. Yes, that had to be it. She was jealous, throwing a tantrum to force him to apologize. With that thought, Derek regained some of his confidence. Gracie, he started, I know you're mad because I've been too nice to Vivian, but I've told you there's nothing between us. I just felt sorry for her. Her husband's gone, and she's raising a child all on her own. It's tough for her, so I wanted to help her out a little. If it bothers you, I won't help her anymore, okay? Please don't be mad anymore, Derek said, shaking her hand slightly, his voice softening into a coaxing tone. In the past, this would have melted Grace's heart. She would have been overjoyed, willing to bare her soul and give him everything. But now all she felt was disgust and irony. Grace studied Derek's face intently, his furrowed brows and tentative, almost fawning expression. She couldn't help but find it laughable. His excuses, weren't they always the same? Being a soldier was a dangerous profession, especially for those on the front lines. Widows raising children alone were, sadly, not uncommon. So why was it only Vivian that Derek had gone out of his way to help? Why not any of the other widows? The answer was simple, just another excuse. Go cook your noodles. I'm heading to bed, Grace said calmly, brushing his hand away. Her indifference stung Derek. But she wasn't throwing a tantrum or making a scene, and that gave him hope. Maybe Grace was just venting her frustration, not truly turning her back on him. That thought reassured him. Derek went to the kitchen, made himself some noodles, and sat down at the table to eat. Unbeknownst to him, Grace had silently appeared in the doorway and was leaning against the frame, watching him eat. Derek noticed her and smiled. Still hungry? I can share some with you. Sit down and eat with me. Her recent coldness had unsettled him, so his words carried an uncharacteristic note of appeasement. I'm full, no need, Grace refused. Then she added, Can you come with me somewhere tomorrow? Although she had made up her mind to divorce, she wanted to end their 3-year marriage with closure before walking away. After all, for these 3 years, she had truly and wholeheartedly loved Derek. Where? Derek asked. You'll know tomorrow. Let's leave at 9 a.m. All right. You have to promise me, no matter what happens tomorrow, you'll stay with me, Grace insisted. Okay. Unless the military calls me back urgently, even if the sky falls, I'll go with you, Derek replied, his voice softening as he looked at her. For a moment, It felt like the Grace who once adored him with her whole heart was back. Even if Vivian shows up, you'll ignore her and stay with me? Grace asked with a faint, bitter smile. That won't happen. Gracie, don't be unreasonable. Derek frowned, his displeasure evident. Just promise me, Grace interrupted, unwilling to listen to his excuses. She turned and walked back to the bedroom. Not long after Grace lay down, Derek entered the room and climbed into bed beside her. As he reached out to hold her, Grace grabbed his wrist. Gracie, it's been so long since we've... Derek leaned closer, his warm breath brushing against her ear as he whispered, gently nibbling on her earlobe. Grace's body involuntarily shuddered at his touch, her sensitivity betraying her resolve. But in the next second, she pushed his hand away and sat up, her voice cold. Don't touch me. I don't want to. What's that supposed to mean, Grace? We're husband and wife. This is normal between a married couple, Derek retorted, his voice low and angry at her rejection. In the darkness, Grace could still see the fiery anger in his eyes, as if ready to erupt. Not wanting to argue, she replied calmly, I'm tired. I don't want to. Let's just sleep. She couldn't bear any physical contact with Derek now. Every touch brought back haunting images of Derek and Vivian together, their arms around each other in public, and who knew what else they'd done in private. The thought alone made her feel sick to her stomach. Seeing her turn her back to him, cocooned in the blanket, Derek felt a surge of frustration. He turned his back to her as well. And so the two of them, once the most intimate of partners, slept back to back, as if separated by an unbridgeable chasm. The next morning, Grace got up and prepared breakfast as if nothing had happened. Derek returned from his morning run, drenched in sweat. Go take a shower, then come eat. I made your favorite, pickled vegetable dumplings, Grace said to Derek with a faint smile. Today was the day she intended to end their marriage. She hoped it would pass smoothly and without regret. After being cold-shouldered by her last night, Derek was momentarily stunned by her sudden warmth. But he quickly recovered and said, All right. He much preferred this gentle, smiling Grace over the one who met him with icy glares. This was the woman he had fallen for, the Grace he knew. After his shower, Derek came out, towel in hand as he dried his hair. So where are we going today? Can you tell me now? He asked. Grace opened her mouth to respond, but before she could, Vivian burst through the gate, tears streaming down her face. Derek, something's wrong with Tommy. He's burning up and unconscious. He's delirious from the fever. Can you please come take a look? I'm so scared. Vivian sobbed, her voice trembling with panic. What? How did this happen? He was fine yesterday. Derek's expression shifted, his concern immediate. Hearing this, Grace's eyes darkened. So before Derek came home last night, he had already been at Vivian's place, checking on her and her son. She felt a wave of disgust rise in her chest. This man, was he truly managing two households right out in the open? I don't know. Maybe he got cold last night and kicked off his blanket. Derek, his fever is so high. Do you think he'll end up brain damaged? Vivian continued crying, her voice breaking. Derek didn't hesitate. He flung the towel onto the table. Let's go. I'll come with you to see him. Derek, what did you promise me last night? Grace's calm voice cut through the tension, halting Derek in his tracks. He turned to look at her. Grace was seated on a chair, her gaze steady and cold. The room was dimly lit, but Derek could clearly see the frost in her eyes. A chill ran down his spine as he recalled his promise to her the night before. Unless it was an emergency summons from the military, he had vowed to accompany her, no matter what, even if knives rained down from the sky. And when she had asked what he would do if Vivian came to him, he had dismissed it as impossible, accusing her of making a fuss. Now the icy mockery in Grace's eyes felt like a blade scraping against his dignity, leaving him exposed and embarrassed. How had it come to this? How could it be so coincidental? Vivian, sensing Derek's hesitation, quickly grabbed his arm. Derek, I know I shouldn't interrupt your life, but I'm so scared. Please come with me to check on Tommy. I beg you. Grace, I know I'm in the wrong. It's my fault. I promise this will be the last time I bother Derek. After this, I'll never come to you again. Vivian's voice was desperate. Gracie, lives are at stake. I have to go check on this. Wait for me. Tommy is fine, and I'll be back to stay with you right away. Derek, flustered by Vivian's tears, couldn't bear the thought of something happening to Tommy. He threw out those words hastily, grabbed Vivian's hand, and left in a hurry. Grace watched their figures disappear into the distance. The pain in her heart, long numbed, now felt strangely dull. Without a flicker of emotion, she picked up a steamed bun, tore it apart, and ate it slowly, bite by bite. It didn't matter. This wasn't the first time Derek had abandoned her. She was used to it by now. That thorn named Derek, lodged deep in her heart, had to be pulled out one day. And when she did, she would make sure he could never hurt her again. After finishing her breakfast, Grace sat at home, waiting for Derek until 9 o'clock. When the agreed time came and Derek still hadn't returned, she stopped waiting. She got up, grabbed her things, and left the house on her own. She would not let someone who didn't deserve her attention disrupt her plans. If Derek wouldn't accompany her, she'd go alone. This farewell trip to their marriage, she could take it by herself. Chapter 4. Grace strolled along the park path in the city center, holding a stick of candied hawthorn in her hand. Suddenly, someone bumped into her. She steadied herself and instinctively reached out to catch the child who had run into her. The moment she saw the child's face, her eyes widened in surprise. Tommy? What are you doing here? None of your business, you homewrecker. Blah. Tommy stuck his tongue out at her, made a silly face, and broke free from her hand, running off. Grace frowned as she watched him disappear into the distance. Without thinking, she followed him. Hadn't Vivian said he was unconscious with a high fever? Why was he wandering around the park? Grace trailed Tommy to the children's play area. It was a paradise for kids, with parents either sitting or standing nearby to keep watch. Then she saw them, Derek and Vivian, standing face to face behind a large tree talking. Grace let out a cold laugh. So the child who was supposedly burning up with fever was perfectly fine, and they had simply taken her for a fool. A wave of anger surged within her, and before she could stop herself, she strode toward them. As she got closer, their conversation drifted to her ears. Derek, I'm so sorry. Once again, it's me and Tommy keeping you from your plans. I didn't expect Tommy to wake up and insist on coming to the park. You didn't go back to be with your wife. She won't be mad, will she? It's fine. She won't be upset. Derek glanced at his watch, his response half-hearted. He was wondering what Grace was doing at that moment. Was she angry with him? In the past, he'd been confident that no matter how upset Grace got, he could always coax her back. But now he wasn't so sure. Vivian's voice grew soft and pitiful. Derek, you used to call me Vivi. Now you call me Vivian. Is it because you've given the name Gracie to her? Hearing this, Grace felt her mind go blank. She didn't know if it was pain or numbness, but for the first time, she felt a searing ache that made her chest tighten unbearably. She still remembered the first time Derek had called her Gracie. She had been surprised and asked him, "Why not call me Star?" "Why Gracie?" "Because everyone calls you Star," he had replied. "But only I call you Gracie. To me, you're unique." At the time, his words had moved her to tears. Now she realized that this so-called uniqueness was nothing more than a recycled affection. He had called Vivian Vivi, and when he couldn't have her, he had settled for Grace as a stand-in. Even the nickname wasn't truly hers. In that moment, Grace felt like the punchline of a cruel joke. She no longer had the desire to confront Derek. Turning on her heel, she walked away without looking back. That despicable man, she was done with him. Whoever wanted him could have him. He wasn't worth another second of her time, let alone her emotions. Her stride was firm and resolute, so she didn't hear Derek's reply. Vivian, what are you talking about? You're you and Grace is Grace. That name has always been hers. What do you mean I gave it to her? Vivian, noticing Grace's retreating figure, allowed a sly smile to creep onto her lips. Not wanting to upset Derek further, she softened her tone. I'm sorry, Derek. That was out of line. Let's go check on Tommy. We wouldn't want him to faint from the heat again. For reasons he couldn't explain, Derek felt a wave of unease. It was as if something precious had slipped through his fingers without him realizing it. Unable to pinpoint the cause, he pressed his lips into a thin line and let Vivian lead him away, further and further from Grace in every sense. That night, Derek returned home to find Grace sitting at the table, waiting for him. On the table in front of her was a document. Gracie, I'm sorry for today. Derek began, only to be interrupted. There's no need to apologize. Sit down. I have something to discuss with you, Grace said calmly. What is it? Derek asked instinctively. Grace started, but Derek cut her off. We're not getting divorced. I won't agree to it, Gracie. Don't bring it up again. His tone was sharp, his gaze resolute. Grace had already mentioned divorce to Derek before, because of Vivian and her son, Tommy. Today, Derek canceled their plans together for the sake of them. Grace was sure to be upset, and Derek assumed she was going to bring up divorce again, which only made him furious. What Grace couldn't understand was why Derek was so insistent on staying in their marriage. After all, wasn't it Vivian he truly loved? Why would he hold on to someone like her? Someone who wasn't even worthy of her own name. Why? Don't you love Vivian? If we divorce, I'll step aside and give her the place she deserves. Wouldn't that be better for everyone? Grace asked, her confusion evident. In her mind, love was simple. If you like someone, you should be with them. If you didn't, you should let go. It was the most straightforward way to handle feelings. She couldn't comprehend Derek's actions. Being kind to Vivian on one hand while refusing to let go of their marriage on the other. Who said I love Vivian? I don't love her, Derek's face turned cold as he spoke. But before he could finish, a knock on the door interrupted him. Immediately after, Vivian's voice rang out. Derek, Tommy just fell. He twisted his ankle, hit his head, and there's so much blood. Can you help me carry him to the clinic? I'm so scared. Vivian's voice trembled as she spoke, her sobs punctuating her words. She sounded like her entire world had just collapsed. Derek, who had been cold and distant just moments before, suddenly looked anxious. Without a second thought, he turned to open the door for Vivian. Grace watched, her gaze darkening. Her chest ached with a dull, suffocating pain. It had been too short a time. She hadn't yet managed to completely erase Derek from her heart. Seeing him tangled up with Vivian still hurt. The moment the door opened, Vivian threw herself into Derek's arms, clutching his shirt as she cried pitifully. Derek, I'm so scared something will happen to Tommy. I don't know what to do. Caught off guard by the sudden embrace, Derek instinctively turned his head to glance at Grace. Her eyes were cold, her expression detached as she stared at him. Derek felt a pang of unease in his chest. Realizing that Vivian was still in his arms, he panicked for a moment before quickly grabbing her shoulders and pushing her away. Don't cry, Vivian. I'll go with you to check on Tommy right now, Derek said softly. You can go, Grace interjected, her tone calm. But first, help me sign this document. I need it for tomorrow. Grace, is this really the time for that? You're forcing me to sign something when a child's life might be in danger? Is a signature more important than Tommy's life? Derek snapped, his anger flaring as he tried to sweat the document out of her hands. He didn't know what the document was about or why Grace was so insistent on having him sign it. All he felt was rage at her cold-heartedness. But Grace was quick to pull the papers back before he could touch them. It takes only a few seconds to sign. Once you're done, you can leave. Unless, of course, you'd rather stay here arguing with me, she said with a faint smirk. Her gaze was sharp as she added, "Do you really think you can leave if I don't want you to?" Though she had stepped away from the front lines 3 years ago, she had never stopped training. Keeping Derek from leaving wasn't an empty threat. "Grace, you," Derek's fury boiled over. Vivian quickly grabbed his arm, her voice soft and pleading. "Derek, just help her sign it. Maybe it's something urgent. It won't take long and it's okay." Derek glanced at the gentle and understanding Vivian, then at the cold and unyielding Grace. His frustration spilled over. "Look at Vivian, so kind, so considerate. And then look at you, always so harsh and unreasonable like a shrew," he shouted. Grace didn't bat an eye at his words. She simply held out the document and pen again. "Sign it." Derek, seething with anger, snatched the pen and scribbled his name across the paper. "There. Are you happy now?" he spat. "Perfect. You can leave now," Grace said flatly, reaching out to take the pen from his hand. "Grace, you've disappointed me beyond words," Derek growled, throwing the pen to the ground and storming out with Vivian. Grace stared at the pen, now broken in two on the floor, and felt a sharp pang in her chest. That pen had been a gift from Derek, a token of their love when they first got together. She had cherished it for years, handling it with care to avoid any scratches or damage. And now, something she had treasured so deeply had been discarded by Derek as if it were nothing. She stared at it for a long moment before finally turning away. Without picking it up, she closed the door and went back to her room to sleep. The next morning, when Grace woke up, Derek was nowhere to be seen. She didn't care. Instead, she grabbed the divorce papers Derek had signed and went to see Colonel Marcus. Marcus expedited the process, personally overseeing the paperwork and stamping it for her. When Grace held the finalized divorce certificate in her hands, she felt a moment of disorientation. These past 3 years had felt like a dream she had woven for herself, a dream that started sweet but ended bitter. Now that the dream was over, it was time for her to leave. "Colonel, please make sure Derek gets his copy after I'm gone," Grace said. "Of course. By the way, your father called me. He was asking about how you've been lately. I told him about your plans to join the mission. While there's still time, you should go home and see them. They did it for your own good back then," the colonel said with a heavy sigh. Back then, in order to be with Derek, Grace had severed ties with her family. For years, she had truly hardened her heart and never returned. If Victor wanted to know anything about his daughter, he had to dig for information through subtle inquiries, which was both frustrating and saddening. "I know. I'll go back today," Grace murmured, her throat tightening. After leaving the colonel's office, Grace went straight home to pack her belongings and headed to the station to buy a ticket. Her hometown was in the neighboring city, and there was a direct bus that only took an hour and a half. In the 3 years of her marriage to Derek, she hadn't gone back even once, because Derek didn't like it. This short journey home, less than 90 minutes, had taken her 3 years to finally embark on. And today no one was going to stop her. Her heart was resolute as she set out for home. But when she finally stood at her doorstep, she found herself hesitating, overwhelmed by the emotions of returning. She stood there for a long time, unable to knock. "What's wrong? Running away again?" A cold, authoritative voice suddenly broke the silence, causing Grace to shiver. She turned around in a panic, her gaze lifting to meet her father's. He stood there, looking at her with a calm yet distant expression. She hadn't seen him in 3 years and had no idea when he'd appeared behind her. "Dad." Grace's voice was barely above a whisper as she called out to him. Victor let out a faint scoff and walked past her to open the door. He didn't call her inside, but neither did he close the door behind him. It was as if he was leaving the choice up to her. Come in or stay out, it was entirely her decision. Gritting her teeth, Grace followed him into the house. Victor, you're back. Perfect timing, Sarah's words trailed off as she turned and saw Grace standing there. The spatula in her hand clattered to the floor. Star. Sarah whispered in disbelief. Mom. Seeing her mother, Grace could no longer hold back her emotions. She dropped her luggage and rushed forward, wrapping Sarah in a tight embrace. Oh, Star, my star, you've finally come home. I thought I'd never see you again in this lifetime. Sarah sobbed, clutching her daughter tightly. You heartless child. You said you wouldn't come back and you really didn't. I thought I'd die before I ever saw you again, she cried, her hands gently patting Grace's back. Hearing her mother's tearful reproaches, Grace felt as if a gaping hole had been torn in her chest, cold winds blowing through her heart. For the past 3 years, she had been an unfilial daughter, blindly chasing a so-called love while neglecting the family who truly cared for her. But at least now she had finally come to her senses. It wasn't too late to turn back. Victor, standing nearby, watched the mother and daughter sobbing in each other's arms. His eyes reddened despite himself. After a moment of hesitation, he stepped forward and pulled the 2 most important women in his life into a hug. All right, that's enough crying. If you keep this up, the neighbors will come knocking to see what's going on, he said gruffly. Feeling the warmth of his embrace, Grace froze momentarily, then began crying even harder. She had thought her father would never forgive her in this lifetime. But to her surprise, as long as she was willing to return, her parents had been waiting for her all along. She had been too foolish, realizing the truth far too late. After the family's tearful reunion, the 3 of them sat down for a meal, their eyes still red and swollen. Star, how long are you staying this time? Didn't Derek come back with you? Sarah asked as they ate. At the mention of Derek, her expression stiffened slightly. She had never liked the man who had taken her precious daughter away and caused her to cut ties with her family. But her daughter had loved him. For 3 years, Grace had given up everything for him, including her family. Sarah hadn't been happy about it, but she had grudgingly accepted it for her daughter's sake. She didn't want to upset Grace now that she had finally come home. I'm only staying for a few days. I have a mission to join. Mom, I've divorced him. You don't need to mention him again, Grace said calmly. Sarah froze in shock, about to ask more. But Victor slammed his hand on the table and said loudly, Good. That man wasn't worth your time. Sarah shot him a glare. Don't stir things up here, she said irritably before turning back to Grace. Are you serious? Have you thought this through? Marriage and divorce aren't child's play. You gave up everything to be with him and now, after just 3 years, you say it's over? Are you sure you won't regret this? Grace nodded lightly. I'm sure. I won't regret it. The Colonel approved my divorce request, and I already have the papers. Mom, I was foolish for the past 3 years. I made mistakes and hurt you both. I won't make those mistakes again. No man is worth more than my family. Dad, Mom, I promise I'll never leave you again for someone who doesn't deserve it, Grace said, her eyes misting over. Seeing her so upset, Sarah quickly reached out to pat her back gently. All right, as long as you're happy, I'll support any decision you make, Sarah said without hesitation. Grace lowered her eyes, picking at the rice in her bowl as tears fell silently, one after another, into her meal. Her voice was muffled as she responded with a quiet The past few years had been a haze of naivety. She had been utterly foolish, throwing away the love of her family for someone like Derek, a man who had proven himself utterly unworthy. Thankfully, she had woken up now. While there were regrets, it wasn't too late. From now on, for the rest of her life, she promised herself she would never again fail the people who truly loved her. After dinner, Victor called Grace into the study. "You're really going forward with that program?" Victor asked, his tone calm yet serious. "Yes, Dad," Grace replied, guilt weighing heavily in her voice. "I'm sorry, Dad. I've just come back, and now I'm leaving again so soon." The guilt of not spending enough time with her parents gnawed at her. Joining the mission is a matter of service to the country and its people. "I'm proud of you for stepping up. This is exactly what my daughter should be doing," Victor said, his expression firm. "Better than throwing yourself into romance and obsessing over some man, completely losing your head," he added with a dismissive wave, his tone filled with disdain. Grace was speechless. While the words stung, she couldn't deny their truth. For the past 3 years, she had been hopelessly blinded by love, her mind clouded by emotions. "You're really divorced from Derek? It's final." Victor pressed further. "Yes, just today. Here's the divorce certificate, take a look," Grace said, pulling the document from her pocket and handing it over to her father. Victor took it, scanning it with a serious expression. "You're not going to try to talk me into going back to him, are you?" Grace teased, trying to lighten the mood. These days, divorce was still rare, and in the eyes of many, it was seen as a disgrace. Anyone who got divorced inevitably became the subject of gossip, and women bore the brunt of the judgment. It was common for people to advocate for reconciliation rather than separation. As a result, many women, even in deeply unhappy marriages, refused to divorce for the sake of appearances, enduring a lifetime of misery. "Spare me. If anything, I'd say you came to your senses too late. That Derek kid is nothing but trouble, a schemer through and through. I've disliked him from the start. If it weren't for you insisting on marrying him, I wouldn't have spared him a second glance," Victor said, his face full of contempt. Grace paused, her thoughts swirling. Her father was a straightforward and principled man, but he was also kind and fair. He was not the type to hold unreasonable grudges. She had never seen him express such overt disdain for someone before. There had to be more to this than just her failed marriage to Derek. "Dad, why do you hate Derek so much? Is there something I don't know?" Grace asked directly, unable to shake the nagging sense that there was more to the story. Victor hesitated for a moment before sighing. "You're right. There is more to it. But now that you're divorced, there's no harm in telling you. You remember how 3 years ago you gave up that promotion opportunity? What you didn't know was that your competition for that position was Derek. The military was looking to groom a promising officer, and between the two of you, you had the upper hand. That boy must have caught wind of it somehow. Unable to surpass you with his abilities, he resorted to seduction. And you, my foolish daughter, fell for it, letting him lure you away just like that. And because of confidentiality rules, I couldn't tell you the truth. No matter how much I tried to talk sense into you, you wouldn't listen. I could only watch as you got swept away by him. Just thinking about it makes my blood boil." Victor vented, his frustration evident. But when he noticed Grace's face darkening, he immediately grew concerned. "Grace, are you okay? Did I say too much?" Victor asked cautiously, worried that he had upset her. Only then did he realize that perhaps he shouldn't have revealed the truth. Wasn't this essentially telling her that her marriage to Derek had been nothing but a calculated scheme? "Dad, I'm fine. Really. In fact, I've never felt better than I do right now," Grace said, forcing a small smile. She had believed her relationship with Derek had been a natural progression of feelings. Never in her worst nightmares did she imagine that it had all been part of his deliberate plan. This revelation disgusted her even more than Derek's betrayal with his so-called true love, because this meant that from the very beginning, everything between them had been a lie. Her youthful infatuation before marriage, and her wholehearted devotion afterward, 6 years of her life, had been nothing but a cruel joke. Now that she knew Derek's true colors, Grace felt no lingering attachment or affection for him. The mere thought of him filled her with nothing but revulsion. Grace stayed home for a week, cherishing the time she had with her parents. In that entire week, she didn't think about Derek even once. On the final day, her father personally drove her back to the military base, where she rejoined Colonel and the team he led. From there, a designated vehicle would take her to the site of the mission. Though Victor's face remained stoic, there was a trace of reluctance in his eyes as he watched her leave. This mission is incredibly perilous, but if completed, it will bring great benefits to the nation and its people. Star, since you've chosen to participate, you must give it your all, even if it costs you your life. I will, Dad. Take good care of yourself and Mom. I'll make sure to stay safe. Wait for me to bring back the honor and make you proud, Grace said with unwavering determination. All right, I believe in you. Your mom and I will be waiting for you at home. Victor smiled, waving her off. Grace got into the car, which slowly drove away. Through the small gap in the curtains, she caught a glimpse of Derek's figure flashing past. She wasn't sure if her eyes were playing tricks on her, but she had no desire to turn and confirm. For her, Derek was a chapter long closed. She was ready to embark on a new journey, to reclaim her life and embrace a fresh start. Derek, on the other hand, saw the car Grace was in but failed to catch sight of her inside. What he did see was Victor. Derek hadn't expected to run into his former father-in-law at the barracks. He had always been wary of Victor. The moment he spotted Victor's car from afar, Derek instinctively ducked into a corner, avoiding any chance of confrontation. He watched Victor get into his car and drive away before cautiously emerging from the shadows, frowning deeply. What's Victor doing here? He muttered to himself in confusion. Colonel, Derek is behind us, the driver, Tommy, said as he glanced into the rearview mirror. Victor cast a cold glance back and sneered. Ignore him. That scoundrel had used despicable means to lure Star away from their family. Of course, he'd feel guilty and avoid facing him. It wasn't surprising in the least. Victor had never approved of Derek while he was with Star. Now that they were divorced, he couldn't be bothered to give him the time of day. That night, after finishing his work, Derek returned home, expecting to find Grace there. Instead, the house was eerily empty, devoid of any signs of life. A strange unease crept into his chest. Gracie? Gracie? He called out, rushing toward the bedroom in search of her. But the bedroom was empty. Even the wedding photo of the two of them that had adorned the wall was gone. Derek's heart sank further. The last time he had promised to take Grace out, he'd been called away by Vivian because Tommy had fallen ill. That night, he had intended to have a proper conversation with Grace, but it had spiraled into yet another fight over her demand for a divorce, and Vivian showing up uninvited had only made things worse. For the past week, he hadn't returned home. Partly, he'd wanted to give Grace time to cool off, to remind her that he wasn't someone she could take for granted. But mostly, he hadn't wanted to face her cold glares or hear her nag about divorce. He had never imagined that after just 1 week of absence, the house would become so empty. It felt like all traces of her had vanished, leaving the place devoid of any warmth. He strode quickly to the wardrobe and flung it open. His blood ran cold. Inside, only his clothes were left, neatly arranged. Grace's belongings were entirely gone, not a single item remaining. It was as if she had completely erased herself from their home, leaving no trace behind. Derek's mind buzzed with confusion, leaving him momentarily paralyzed. After a long pause, a thought struck him, and he dashed out of the house to knock on the neighbor's door. "Nick! Are you home, Nick?" Derek shouted, his voice edged with panic. Hearing the commotion, Nick opened the door, his face puzzled. "Captain Chu, what's the matter? You look terrible," Nick asked, stepping forward. "Nick, is your wife home? I need to talk to her," Derek said, clenching his fists tightly. "She's inside." "Come in," Nick replied. But before Nick could finish speaking, Derek had already brushed past him, striding into the house. Nick frowned and followed him, only to hear Derek's urgent questioning. "Nancy, have you seen Grace these past few days?" "I haven't," Nancy replied curtly. "She's your wife. Why are you asking me?" "Nancy, your house is right next to ours. If Grace had come or gone, you would have seen her," Derek pleaded. "I've been away for a few days, and now I've come home to find all of Grace's things gone. I'm worried something might have happened to her. Please, if you've seen her, tell me." The desperation in Derek's voice made him seem almost pitiable. Nancy's face, initially indifferent, twisted into anger as she lashed out. "Now you're worried? Where were you when she needed you? Her things are gone because she moved out, obviously. And you're worried something happened to her? What could possibly happen? Don't curse her like that." Derek's tone hardened. "You must know something. Did Grace say anything to you before she left?" The sudden shift in his demeanor was intimidating, and Nancy shrank back slightly. Sensing her discomfort, Nick stepped forward to shield his wife. "Captain Chu, let's keep this civil," he said with a frown. Finding her courage again, Nancy peeked out from behind Nick and snapped, "Grace didn't tell me anything. I'm just guessing, all right? Star sent me a bunch of things before she left," Nancy said, her voice carrying a note of disdain. "She said she didn't need them anymore, and told me to take them if I didn't mind. They're all household items, practically brand new. If you went to buy them, they cost a fortune. How could she possibly not need them? She must have been heartbroken, Grace. Heartbroken because of you and Vivian's entanglement. That's why she cleared her stuff out and left." Nancy's words hit Derek like a punch to the gut, his expression instantly darkening. He had noticed before that many things in the house had disappeared. He'd even asked Gracie about it at the time. "Why does it feel like so much stuff is missing? Where did it all go?" She had casually replied, "The things we don't use, I just pack them away. Leaving them out to gather dust only makes the place look messy." It had seemed reasonable enough then, so he hadn't pressed further. But now it struck him like a thunderbolt. She had already decided to leave him back then. A sharp pain twisted in Derek's chest as realization dawned. His face grew grimmer by the second. Knowing that pressing Nancy further wouldn't yield anything more, Derek turned and walked away. Behind him, he heard her muttering under her breath, her voice dripping with contempt. Didn't cherish her when she was around, fooling around with that shameless Vivian. Now that she's gone, he has the nerve to act all heartbroken? Disgusting, utterly disgusting. Pfft. "All right, enough out of you," Nick interrupted, trying to calm her down. "Stop meddling in other people's business." Derek stumbled on, Nancy's words echoing in his mind. So this is how others saw him and Vivian. No wonder Gracie misunderstood. No wonder Gracie made a scene. It was his fault, all of it. But he hadn't meant for things to spiral out of control. He'd only wanted to help Vivian, whose husband had passed away recently. He thought she needed a hand. Who could have predicted that offering help would cost him his own family? If he had just known, he never would have done it. But now, it was too late. Returning to his now empty home, the absence of Grace was a gaping wound that he couldn't ignore. He skipped dinner, his appetite gone. After tidying up aimlessly, he lay down on the bed. Hugging the pillow Grace used to sleep on, his chest ached with a pain so deep, it felt unbearable. He had never imagined this day would come. He'd thought they would be together forever. But then a steely resolve flickered in his eyes. Gracie left because she misunderstood me and Vivian. If I can explain everything to her, she'll forgive me. She'll come back. She'll come home back to me. Clinging to this hope, Derek's heart, which had been battered and numb with pain, began to ease ever so slightly. Hugging Grace's pillow, he tossed and turned, finally slipping into a restless sleep. But then, A sharp knock at the door shattered the fragile silence. Derek's eyes flew open. "Derek, Tommy's running a fever again," came Vivian's voice, trembling and laced with tears. "He's crying and asking for you. Can you come with me to check on him?" Normally, Derek would have jumped out of bed without hesitation. But this time, he sat up abruptly, his gaze falling to the empty space beside him. The urgency he usually felt in such moments was extinguished, replaced by a crushing sense of doubt. Gracie had left because of his constant involvement with Vivian. Could he really keep doing this? For the first time, Derek hesitated. The moonlight streaming through the window illuminated the clock on his bedside table. 9 p.m. The same time as always. Now that he thought about it, Vivian always showed up at this hour. Every time it was Tommy. A fever. A twisted ankle. A scraped knee. Tommy seemed to always be unwell, always needing something. Outside, Vivian's pleading cries grew more desperate, but before Derek could pull back the covers, Nancy's sharp voice rang out from next door. "Did someone die in your house? What's with all the wailing? Do you have any idea how annoying you are?" Derek froze mid-motion as Vivian stammered an apology. "I'm sorry, Nancy. Tommy has a fever and I'm worried. If the kid's sick, go see a doctor." "Derek's not a doctor. What do you want from him?" I just know Derek better, that's all." Vivian's voice trembled, defensive. "Pfft. Don't give me that. You think I can't see through you? You're trying to worm your way into Derek's life, aren't you? Trying to make him yours and leave Star without a husband. Shameless." Vivian's protests grew more frantic. I didn't mean that, Nancy. Oh, spare me. You think I don't know what's going on? You're just playing the pity card, hoping to snatch Derek for yourself. You're disgusting. Star saw right through you, but she was too kind to call you out. Not me, though. I'm not that gracious. Now shut up and go home. They're not here for you to bother anymore. If you keep getting in my way, I swear I'll chase you out with a broom." Nancy slammed the door shut with a loud bang. "Nosy old hag," Vivian muttered under her breath, her voice laced with irritation. "He's back, isn't he? So why isn't he home?" She continued to grumble, reluctantly walking away. Behind the closed door, Derek stood stiffly, listening to her muttered complaints. A chill ran down his spine. So, she knew he was home? She had come over specifically to find him, to drive him away? Derek quickly threw on his jacket and silently followed Vivian back to her yard. It was a desolate, run-down courtyard, surrounded by nothing but barren land. The nearest neighbor was over 500 meters away. That was precisely why Derek would always rush over whenever Vivian called for him. He worried about her, a single mother raising a child all alone in such an isolated place. But now, as he replayed everything in his mind, a stark realization hit him. No matter how remote her place was, it was still closer to that neighbor than it was to his own home. Details he had deliberately overlooked suddenly came into sharp focus. Derek climbed over the wall and hid in the shadows. "Mom, is Uncle Derek here? Didn't he come?" Tommy asked, his voice soft and hopeful. "No, he's not home," Vivian replied impatiently. "Enough with the act. Drink some hot water and get to bed. Don't really catch a cold and end up being a huge bother." "Okay, Mom," Tommy replied obediently. Dragging his half-frozen body, Tommy slowly climbed onto the bed, wrapping himself tightly in the thin blanket. "Don't get so close to me. You're like an ice cube. Move to the edge," Vivian snapped, her tone full of disdain. "Okay, Mom," Tommy murmured as he shifted closer to the edge. The already narrow blanket now left a portion of his back exposed to the cold. Tommy lay flat and carefully tucked the corner of the blanket under himself, then shut his eyes to sleep. From the shadowed corner, Derek watched the scene unfold, his entire body trembling with an icy fury. No wonder Tommy was always unwell, always falling sick. He had assumed the boy was just frail and sickly by nature. He never imagined it was all part of a carefully orchestrated performance by this mother and son duo. What a fool he had been. He had sacrificed everything, including Gracie, who had once adored him with her whole heart, for them. He was a complete idiot. He deserved this. Derek's eyes burned with rage, his vision blurring with unshed tears. Chapter 8. Derek stumbled back into his empty home, the silence suffocating. Regret crashed over him like an unstoppable tidal wave, dragging him into its depths. Gracie, I was blind. I was stupid. I let myself be deceived and I hurt you. I destroyed what we had. I ruined our marriage. He whispered to himself, his voice breaking. It's my fault. All my fault. I deserve this. I really do. As if punishing himself, Derek slapped his face hard twice. The sting wasn't enough to drown out the ache in his heart. Tears welled up in his eyes, spilling over as he choked on his emotions. Gracie, I've realized my mistakes. I'll explain everything to you. I never had anything with Vivian, I swear. You'll forgive me, won't you? You have to forgive me. Despair and hope warred within him as he drifted into an uneasy sleep, haunted by thoughts of Gracie. The next morning, Derek woke up with a singular goal: to go to the Liu family's home and beg Grace for forgiveness. But before he could leave, he was summoned to Colonel's office. Colonel, is there an assignment for me? Derek asked as he entered the room, his mind still preoccupied with how he would win Grace back. No, but I have something for you, Colonel replied coolly, pulling a document from his desk drawer and handing it over. Derek's heart raced. He was so focused on his plans to reconcile with Grace that he barely registered what he was holding, until his eyes landed on the words at the top, divorce certificate. His name and Grace's name printed side by side were like twin daggers piercing his heart. Colonel, this can't be real. I didn't file for divorce. Grace and I couldn't possibly be divorced. This must be a mistake, right? Derek stammered, his voice rising in disbelief. This is no mistake, Colonel responded firmly. Grace submitted the divorce request herself. Your signatures are both on the document. The process was entirely legal and valid. Derek's mind reeled, flashing back to that day when Grace had insisted he sign a document. At the time, Vivian had called crying about Tommy's high fever, saying she feared he'd suffer lasting damage if Derek didn't come quickly. In his panic, Grace had tried to stop him, and he had snapped, signing the paper in frustration just to get her off his back. He hadn't even glanced at the content. So that paper, that was the divorce application Grace had prepared? Derek's eyes turned bloodshot. Colonel, this doesn't count. I didn't agree to the divorce. She tricked me into signing. I had no idea it was a divorce document. If you signed it, then it counts, Colonel said sternly. This is a personal matter between the two of you. As long as the procedure is legitimate, it's final. How can this be final? I don't accept it, Derek cried, his voice desperate. You're a battalion commander, Derek. Don't say things that make you sound laughable, Colonel said with a disapproving frown. Colonel, please, do you know where Grace is? Tell me where she went. I need to find her. I need to make this right. Derek pleaded, his voice breaking. Just give me a chance. I can win her back. I know I can. But Colonel's expression remained unreadable as he stood firm. The Colonel glanced at him, a flicker of appreciation in his eyes for this capable young subordinate he had always relied upon. He let out a sigh and said, Star is involved in a top-secret operation. Even I don't know her whereabouts now. Your divorce is final. Accept reality and move on. I have a meeting to attend. Take the day off to cool down and think things through. Take care of yourself, the Colonel said, getting up and patting Derek on the shoulder before leaving. Derek lowered his head, his hands clenched into tight fists. When he looked up again, His bloodshot eyes burned with determination. Gracie, I won't let go. I'll find you. No matter what. Grace had no idea about Derek's regret. She was deep in the mountains, undergoing grueling training that pushed her body to the brink of exhaustion. At the end of each day, she was so drained she didn't even want to lift a finger. Every moment of training demanded her full effort, and after the sessions, she would collapse into sleep, leaving no time to think about Derek. As the training progressed, some of her peers couldn't keep up and were eliminated. But the intense regimen only made Grace stronger and sharper. Finally, Grace and 5 others were selected to form an elite task force for an important mission. Grace was named the team leader. The 6 of them were transported to another base to meet the key figure they were tasked with protecting at all costs. Grace hadn't expected the person to be someone she knew. It was Marcus, her mentor, her guide. He was the one who had once led her through her own growth, teaching her countless skills along the way. Their colleagues used to call them the twin blades, a pair deadly when together, yet equally brilliant when apart. He was reserved, taciturn, and always serious. Compared to Derek's cold demeanor, Marcus was an unyielding glacier, eternally frozen and unapproachable. Back then, when Grace fell for Derek and insisted on leaving to marry him, she had severed ties with Marcus. 3 years had passed since they last saw each other. He looked just as composed and striking as ever, unchanged in the slightest. Their eyes met and held. Grace tugged at the corners of her lips, forcing a smile as she spoke. Marcus, long time no see. The man who had been standing there, aloof and indifferent, suddenly seemed jolted by something. He strode over to her without warning and pulled her into a firm embrace. The hug caught Grace completely off guard, leaving her stunned. Before she could react, she heard his low voice close to her ear. "Star, welcome home." Just that one sentence, and Grace's eyes welled up with tears. Marcus was an expert in weapons research, while she had always been his most formidable operative. Whenever new weapons emerged abroad, she would infiltrate enemy territory as part of a special operations team, risking everything to acquire those weapons for him to study. If retrieving the weapons proved impossible, she would rely on sheer grit and life-or-death combat to memorize the enemy's weapon specs. She would return and relay the data to him, and he would reverse-engineer the weapon. During his research, she acted as his test subject, replicating battlefield conditions to the greatest extent possible. It was their seamless collaboration that earned them the moniker Twin Blades. Their research lab had once been their home. Grace had been absent for 3 years because of Derek. Now she was back on the path she was meant to follow. Just hearing the words "welcome home" struck a chord deep in her heart. She clung tightly to Marcus, too afraid to speak. She feared that if she opened her mouth, he would hear the tremor in her voice, betraying her tears. She didn't want to show her vulnerability. "Why are you crying? Did you endure a lot these past 3 years?" Marcus noticed the damp patch on his shirt and realized she had been crying. He placed his hands on her shoulders and gently pushed her back to look at her tear-streaked face, his brows furrowing in concern. From the moment he learned she had fallen for Derek, his heart had been a barren wasteland. During her 3 years of marriage to Derek, Marcus had buried himself in his experiments, numbing himself with relentless work and refusing to ask about her life. Now that she stood before him again, he couldn't stop himself from holding her. He told himself it was just a friendly gesture, an embrace between old friends, even in front of their team. Surely it wouldn't cross any boundaries or affect her. But he hadn't expected her tears. Her reddened eyes and the faint trails of tears felt like a heavy blow, striking him straight to the core and leaving him in pain. Chapter 9. Grace blinked back her tears, shaking her head wordlessly, her throat too tight to form words. "Old Yao, take the rest of the team to settle in. I need to talk to Star," Marcus instructed before leading Grace to his office. He guided her to a seat and poured her a glass of water. Throughout the entire process, he didn't say a word, choosing instead to sit quietly by her side. Grace wasn't one to wallow in unnecessary sentimentality either. Even when it came to Derek, the man she had loved for 3 years, Grace could let go without hesitation. So after crying for a while, she stopped herself. Her eyes, red and puffy, turned toward Marcus. She gave him a sheepish smile. "Sorry, Marcus. After all this time, we haven't even had a proper catch-up, and now here you are, forced to watch my little melodrama." Marcus's face remained icy. "Why are you here for this mission? Did that bastard upset you again?" he asked, though he already knew the answer in his heart. Of course, that's what happened. Otherwise, given her personality, she wouldn't have been crying like this. "Something did happen and it woke me up," Grace admitted. "But as for participating in this mission, it was my own decision. It has nothing to do with what he did to me." "Are you an idiot? You've been treated like crap, and you didn't even say anything? I'm still alive, you know." Marcus snapped, his tone harsh. Though he had deliberately distanced himself from her over the years, avoiding any news about her, if she had ever sought his help, he would have stepped in immediately. The truth was, he hadn't been able to face her because he feared what his own dark thoughts might lead him to do, things that might make her hate him. But he hadn't anticipated that his avoidance would leave her to endure so much pain on her own. If he had known, he would never have let her suffer like this. Grace was silent. Marcus was still the same Marcus. Just a few words from him, and she was instantly transported back to the days when she used to be around him, those familiar feelings, that familiar state of mind. With a helpless expression, she said, "Marcus, don't talk like that. Who just casually mentions dying out of nowhere? And besides, it's not like he's been awful to me for 3 whole years. For the first 2.5 years, things were good between us, really sweet actually. It's only in the last few months that things changed. So you let yourself be miserable for months? And you don't think that's foolish?" Marcus's frown deepened. Hearing her talk about how happy she had been with Derek in the past was like a stab to his heart. Yet he also felt a small sense of relief. As long as she had been happy, his own feelings didn't matter. But when she mentioned those months of misery, he almost exploded. "Yeah, it was foolish," Grace admitted with a wry smile. "That's why I chose to cut my losses." Grace knew Marcus's harsh words came from a place of care, not disdain, so she didn't take them to heart. "I've already divorced him," she said calmly. "What? You're divorced?" Marcus rarely lost his composure, but now he shot up from his seat, fists clenched tightly, his face a mix of shock and disbelief. For a moment, Grace thought she saw a glimmer of light in his eyes. She had gotten divorced. Was that really such a cause for celebration? "Yes. I didn't want to keep draining myself emotionally over a man who wasn't worth it, so I divorced him," she said matter-of-factly. "Anyway, Marcus, I'll have to trouble you to look out for me again in the future," she added with a small smile. "Got it. Now go. I'll have someone take you to your quarters. I've got things to handle." "I'll come find you once I'm done," Marcus said briskly. "All right," Grace replied, assuming he really did have work to do. After Grace left, Marcus shut the door to his office. The man who could face the collapse of a mountain without flinching now paced back and forth in the room like a headless chicken. If anyone had been there, they would have heard him muttering to himself, "Divorced. Divorce is good. This means I still have a chance." With her personality, Star definitely won't be thinking about romance anytime soon. "I can't come on too strong, or I'll scare her off. But I can't act too aloof either. If I keep waiting, she might end up with someone else again. What am I supposed to do?" Marcus rubbed his temples, frustration evident. Grace, of course, had no idea about Marcus's inner turmoil. She followed the staff member he had assigned to take her to her quarters. The space was clean and simple, furnished with only a bed, a desk, and a chair, nothing more. Grace made the bed, laid out her blanket, and grabbed some fresh clothes from her luggage. After a quick shower, she lay down and fell asleep. A couple of days later, she and her team were assigned to escort Marcus on a mission. When she learned that Marcus would be joining the mission, Grace initially tried to refuse. But she couldn't win against him. He was her superior, the highest-ranking officer on this mission. She couldn't disobey his orders. "Don't be mad," Marcus said, noticing her frosty demeanor. "I'm not trying to cause trouble for you and your team. It's just that this new weapon is unique. I need to experience it personally to gather accurate data. We'll do everything we can to protect you," Grace replied firmly. Nothing could happen to Marcus. That was the mission for Grace and her team. A mission they would complete even at the cost of their own lives. "Don't put so much pressure on yourself. Don't forget who taught you everything you know," Marcus said, his tone light. Grace blinked, momentarily stunned, before realizing what he meant. Marcus wasn't just a researcher holed up in a lab, helpless in the face of danger. His combat skills were formidable as well. He had once been on the front lines himself, personally carrying out missions. He was simply too gifted in research. Fearing for his safety, higher-ups had specially assembled a data reconnaissance team for him. As one of its members, she happened to be an ideal match for him, capable of perfectly assisting him in acquiring precise data for his research without him having to personally go into the field. This arrangement allowed him to stay behind the scenes. In other words, his combat skills were equally formidable. Grace felt a slight relief in her heart, but her expression remained solemn. She said, "No matter what, you can't let anything happen to you. Don't worry. I'll be fine." Marcus reached out and tousled her hair. Grace frowned tightly, looking at him. Marcus said nonchalantly, "You're too young to frown like that. You look like an old lady." Although Grace and the rest of the team were highly trained elites, deeply familiar with weapon specifications, and had Marcus, a weapons expert, in their midst, their mission still took an unexpected turn. Grace and Marcus got separated from the rest of the squad. The two of them navigated through the dense forest, trying to shake off the pursuers on their trail. The enemy was relentless, chasing them doggedly. They were locked in a high-stakes game of cat and mouse, with firefights erupting frequently. However, their ammunition was limited and quickly ran out. They exchanged a glance, instantly understanding each other's intent. If they were out of bullets, they'd have to rely on hand-to-hand combat. Moving like phantoms, they each chose a hiding spot. With perfect coordination, they managed to take down their pursuers one by one. Grace dealt the killing blow to the last soldier. As she pulled her combat knife free, blood splattered across her face. Unbothered, she wiped it off with the back of her hand and looked up at Marcus with a smile. "Finally done. You were amazing, Star," Marcus praised her. But in the next moment, his tall figure seemed to collapse in on itself, as if drained of all strength. He fell heavily to the ground. Chapter 10. Grace was startled. She rushed forward to catch Marcus as he fell. "Marcus, what's wrong?" "Marcus?" she asked anxiously, her voice trembling. She didn't dare shout too loudly, fearing there might still be stragglers nearby. The moment she wrapped her arms around him, she understood. Her hand pressed against his back came away drenched in blood. Her pupils dilated as she recalled an earlier scene. At the time, they still had a few bullets left, but the enemy's assault was at its most intense. She had just dodged an incoming bullet and taken down one of the attackers when Marcus had pulled her into his arms. She'd heard the gunfire and his muffled grunt. She had asked him, "Marcus, were you hit?" "No, I just stepped on a rock," he had replied casually. "Let me check," she had insisted, worried. "No need. I'm fine. Let's move before they catch up," he'd said, tugging her along. The situation had been too urgent, and she had believed him, letting him lead the way. Thinking back now, it must have been then that he'd taken the bullet for her. He denied it, and she had believed him. How could she have been so blind? Her mission had been to protect him, and yet not only had she failed, but he had also risked his life to shield her. She berated herself bitterly. But regret was useless now. Grace quickly hoisted Marcus onto her back and began searching for a safe hiding place, a cave where they could take refuge. She found a secluded cave and brought Marcus inside. After ensuring the cave was secure, she left briefly to gather some wild fruits and water. With Marcus unconscious from his injuries, their only options were to wait for rescue or for him to regain consciousness so they could plan their next move. Grace lit a fire in the cave and examined Marcus's wound. The bullet was still lodged in his body. She sterilized her knife over the flames and prepared the hemostatic powder and bandages from her emergency kit. Taking a deep breath, she began the grueling task of removing the bullet herself. She worked carefully, applying medicine and bandaging his wound once it was extracted. Despite Grace's meticulous efforts, Marcus developed a fever in the middle of the night. As he tossed and turned in his delirium, he began to mutter in his sleep, "Star, don't like him, he doesn't deserve you." Grace couldn't help but let out a bitter laugh. So everyone around her had seen through Derek. Everyone but her, the fool who had thought he was the best man in the world, giving up everything for him. "Star, I've been by your side all along, watching over you. Why would you rather love him than spare me a single glance?" Marcus murmured again. Grace froze, stunned by his words. What did he mean by that? Was it what she thought it meant? As Marcus continued speaking in fragments, more and more came to light. Grace felt a chill run through her. She never would have guessed Marcus liked her. The realization left her both incredulous and deeply unsettled. That night, Grace stayed awake, tending to him until his fever finally broke. Only then did she allow herself to drift into an uneasy sleep. The next morning, Marcus regained consciousness. His face was pale and drawn, but he managed a weak smile in her direction. "It seems I'm really getting old and useless, causing trouble for Star." Grace shook her head. "Don't say that, Marcus. If it weren't for you taking that bullet for me, you wouldn't be hurt. It's all my fault." "Silly girl, don't blame yourself." Marcus's gaze softened, his face tinged with helplessness. Grace couldn't help but think of the incoherent words Marcus had murmured in his fevered state the night before. Her eyes flickered with emotion. Unable to meet his gaze, she lowered her eyes and said quietly, "Marcus, you should rest well here in the cave. I'll go find some food and scout the area. Maybe I can locate the other members and regroup with them." "All right. Be careful and don't wander too far." Marcus nodded in agreement. Grace replied with a faint okay before getting up to leave. Learning by accident that Marcus had secretly loved her for many years but never dared to confess his feelings, Grace felt a storm of emotions brewing inside her. Mostly, she didn't know how to face him now. As Marcus watched her retreating figure disappear, his gaze grew pensive. The little girl seemed scared. "She won't even look me in the eye. At least I managed to plant the seed by confessing while I had a fever. If I tried to tell her face to face, she probably wouldn't even want to see me again." While scouting the area, Grace encountered the rescue team searching for them. She led the team back to the cave to pick up Marcus, and together they returned to the base. Although everyone had sustained injuries on this mission, at least it could be considered a success. After they returned, Marcus rested for 2 days before diving into work, compiling the data they had gathered on the battlefield and organizing a team to begin research. "Captain Liu, you'd better go talk to Engineer Marcus. His injuries haven't even healed, and he's already throwing himself into research," a guard informed Grace. Grace frowned. It's only been a few days. His wounds haven't even closed yet, and he's already working? That's just reckless. Without hesitation, she followed the guard to find Marcus. "Marcus, you've already written down the data. Hand it over to the other researchers. You need to come back with me and rest properly. Star, I'm fine. I can. Marcus trailed off as he noticed the increasingly frosty look on Grace's face. For once, his usually stoic and composed expression faltered, showing a rare trace of guilt. With a resigned sigh, he conceded, "Fine, I'll come back and rest with you." He looked so pitiful, like a wronged child, that Grace nearly burst out laughing. Keeping her face stern, she escorted Marcus back to his quarters. What she didn't expect was to find Derek waiting outside the dormitory door. It had been over a year since she last saw him. Derek looked noticeably thinner, and his once vibrant energy had dimmed. When he saw Grace, his eyes lit up, and he quickly strode toward her, calling out, "Gracie!" Hearing him call her by that name made Grace think of the conversation she overheard between Derek and Vivian that day. Her eyes flashed with disgust. "Don't call me Gracie. It makes me sick," Grace said coldly. The icy disdain in her voice froze Derek in place. He looked at her, his lips moving slightly, but he suddenly didn't know what to say. "You're already divorced from Star. What are you doing here?" Marcus's voice cut in equally cold. "Our business has nothing to do with you," Derek retorted, turning his wary gaze to Marcus. Grace didn't know, but Derek was well aware that Marcus had feelings for her. In the past, he wouldn't have cared. After all, Grace's heart had belonged solely to him. But now he couldn't afford to be so dismissive. He had yet to win her back, to make her forgive him. Marcus bristled, about to say something, but Grace stopped him. "Marcus, go inside and rest." "I'll talk to him," Grace said. "You're still going to talk to him? You're divorced. What's left to talk about?" Marcus was visibly angry. For once, his emotions slipped out of control. His face flushed, his eyes reddened, and he radiated a barely contained fury. It was the first time Grace had seen him like this, and she found it oddly amusing. She lowered her voice. "I have to end things properly." Marcus was clearly displeased, but he had no grounds to object. With a cold huff, he stormed off, slamming the door behind him with a loud bang. Childishly, he was throwing a tantrum. Grace had never seen this side of Marcus before, and she couldn't help but find it funny. Her faint smile didn't escape Derek's notice, and it sent a wave of unease crashing over him. He glanced at the closed door, the sense of foreboding growing stronger in his chest. "Gracie, let's talk," Derek said, taking a step forward and instinctively reaching for her hand. Grace reacted swiftly, stepping back to avoid his touch. His hand grasped nothing but air, and his expression darkened. The growing sense of loss gnawed at his chest, making his face pale and his heart ache. "Say whatever you have to say, but keep your hands to yourself." Grace's sharp, cold voice cut through the air. Derek looked at her with a face full of sorrow, his voice trembling as he murmured, "Gracie, you've changed. You didn't used to be like this, you. I told you not to call me Gracie. It makes me sick." Grace snapped, her eyes filled with disdain and rejection. Derek noticed her disgust but couldn't understand. Why? Did she loathe him so much now that she couldn't even bear him saying her name? If her hatred had reached this level, how could he possibly win her back? "Why? Ha!" Grace scoffed coldly. "Derek, do you even hear yourself? Don't you think it's ridiculous to ask me that? I'm a person, not a stand-in. Back then, you couldn't have Vivian. After she got married, you settled for me as some kind of substitute. Even after we got married, you couldn't even let me have my own name. You called me Gracie just because you used to call her Vivi, didn't you? I know everything now. Stop putting on an act. It's revolting." Grace's words were laced with palpable disdain, leaving Derek completely stunned. His face turned pale as he stammered, "Gracie, it's not like that. I never saw you as a substitute. Please hear me out. Yes, I used to have feelings for her, but I let it go after she got married. I married you because I truly love you. I called you Gracie because it's part of your name. It's unique, special, something just between us. I never meant to treat you like a replacement. And as for helping Vivian, it's only because her husband passed away. He was my best friend, so I just did a bit more for her. But I have absolutely no feelings for her, I swear. Gracie, you have to believe me. Gracie, I love you. You're the only one I care about. Don't leave me. Please come back. Let's get remarried, okay? Derek's voice was almost a whisper, an uncharacteristic plea that brought him to the brink of humiliation. Ever since he became a unit leader, Derek had always been on top of the world. He rarely had to lower himself, let alone beg. But now he had cast aside all his pride and dignity, just for the chance to win Grace back. Unfortunately for him, Grace wasn't moved in the slightest by his display. All she felt was disgust, and an eerie sense of calm. The year they'd spent apart had been more than enough for her to free herself from the chains of their past relationship. She had dug Derek out of her heart and buried him far away. Now he was just a stranger to her. Her face was calm as she said, "You know me. Once I've made a decision, there's no turning back. I won't be getting back together with you." For 3 years of marriage, she hadn't heard a single "I love you" from Derek. Yet now, a year after their divorce, he was suddenly full of declarations of love. She didn't feel even a shred of joy, only irony. Derek's face grew even paler, and he looked as though he might shatter into pieces. "Gracie, I know I was wrong. I swear I'll never involve myself in Vivian's life again. Can't you forgive me for that? Gracie, let's remarry, okay? I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you." Grace didn't bother correcting his continued use of Gracie. She simply endured the nausea and listened. Finally, she shook her head, her voice unwavering. "No, Derek. We're divorced. I'm doing well now, and I'd appreciate it if you stopped disrupting my life." Derek stared at Grace, and though he didn't want to admit it, he had no choice but to face the truth. He had truly lost her. The Gracie who used to look at him as if he were her whole world was gone. He had destroyed that version of her with his own hands. Derek covered his face, his eyes stinging on the verge of tears. "Leave," Grace said coldly, unmoved. "Don't bother me again." Derek looked at her, his heart aching unbearably. After a long pause, he forced a weak smile and whispered, "All right. Gracie, we were married for 3 years. Can't you at least have one last meal with me? Call it a breakup dinner," Derek said softly. Grace was about to refuse when Derek added, "If you don't agree, I'll just stay here and not leave." "Derek, are you out of your mind?" Grace snapped, unable to hold back. "Think of me however you want," Derek replied calmly. "You know me. Once I've made up my mind, I won't change it." His face was pale, but his expression was steady. Grace's face darkened. In the end, she had no choice but to agree. She didn't want Derek to drag this out any further and complicate things. As the two were about to leave, Marcus's door opened, and he stepped out. "Star, I'm hungry." "Feed me," Marcus said, his tone almost childlike as he looked at Grace. Grace. She found his behavior childish and ridiculous, but she was also relieved. She had no desire to dine alone with Derek. She nodded. "I was just heading out for a meal. Come along." Derek scowled. "Gracie, breakup dinners aren't meant for 3 people. Marcus smirked. "I can sit at the table next to yours." One way or another, he was determined to join them. Derek opened his mouth to protest again, but Grace cut him off irritably. "Eat if you want. If not, forget it." Derek didn't dare say another word, his face dark as he followed the two of them out. The 3 of them walked to the door together, ready to get into the car, when Vivian suddenly appeared from the side, blocking their way. Compared to a year ago, Vivian looked noticeably older and more haggard. Her eyes were red as she glared at Derek, shouting angrily, "I knew you couldn't let go of that shameless woman, Grace." Grace, you've already divorced Derek, yet you're still clinging to him. Don't you have any shame? Vivian snapped, her gaze venomous. Which eye of yours saw me clinging to him? He's the one pestering me. And for your information, this is my turf. Grace rolled her eyes, retorting without hesitation. Vivian was momentarily at a loss for words, glaring at Grace but unable to come up with a response. A year ago, Vivian had been a delicate and charming woman, but now she was well on her way to becoming a shrew. Gracie, I have nothing to do with her. I don't even know why she's here. I swear I didn't ask her to come, Derek hurriedly explained. He had invited Grace to dinner, hoping to win her back. But with Vivian suddenly showing up like this, things were quickly spiraling out of control. Grace was already far from forgiving him, and now with Vivian's unexpected intrusion, she would undoubtedly be even angrier. Grace cast a glance at Derek, her face expressionless. She wasn't angry with Derek. She was just tired, exhausted, really. She had long since moved on from that marriage and had no intention of revisiting the past or wallowing in it. All that toxic relationship had brought her was pain and torment, and she wanted no part of it anymore. Yet here they were, these two people barging into her life again, stirring up trouble and making her sick to her stomach. She followed you all the way here, and you expect me to believe you have nothing to do with her? Who would buy that? Marcus sneered from the side. Star, don't let his sweet words fool you. Some people are two-faced, one way to your face, another behind your back. Grace glanced at him, frowning slightly. Wasn't he supposed to be the cold, silent type? Why was he suddenly so talkative today? If Marcus knew what she was thinking, he would have felt utterly wronged. Sure, he was naturally aloof and not much of a talker, but given the current situation, if he didn't speak up, what if Grace got swayed by Derek again? He wasn't about to make the same mistake of letting her slip away twice. Shut up. This is between me and Gracie. It's none of your business. Derek snapped, clearly agitated. Grace already had issues with him, and with Marcus stirring the pot, she was bound to dislike him even more. And why should he shut up? Marcus is right, Grace said calmly. Derek looked like he'd just been punched in the gut. Gracie, you're siding with him to gang up on me? He asked, incredulous. So what if I am? Didn't you and that woman gang up on Star enough times? Marcus shot back coldly. Derek, just leave. We're divorced. Stop clinging to me. Let's at least leave each other with a shred of dignity, Grace said indifferently. Gracie, are you really not willing to give me another chance? Is there truly no hope for us? Derek asked, his face filled with anguish as he reached out to grab her hand. Before Grace could react, Marcus pulled her back, putting distance between her and Derek. Don't you dare touch her with your filthy hands, Marcus said icily. Derek, Grace doesn't even like you. I'm the one who truly loves you. You used to like me too. Why have you changed now? Vivian cried, clutching Derek's arm and sobbing. With both Marcus and Vivian interrupting, Derek couldn't grab hold of Grace. Though they were less than 2 meters apart, he felt as if an unbridgeable chasm had opened between them. It was as if she was truly out of his reach now, forever. Grace frowned and said, just go. Stop crying and making a scene in front of me. It's disgusting. Marcus, let's go. With that, Grace grabbed Marcus's hand and walked away briskly. Gracie, Gracie. Derek called after her, wanting to chase her. But Vivian clung to him tightly, refusing to let him move. Derek, Grace doesn't love you anymore. Even if you catch up to her, it won't matter. Derek, look at me. I love you. I've been waiting for you, Vivian pleaded tearfully. You used to like me, didn't you? You treated me so well before. Why are you different now? She cried. A year ago, Vivian's beauty and delicacy might have made her tearful pleas seem pitiful and endearing. But now, with her haggard appearance, her behavior only evoked disgust and disdain. Derek forcefully pried her hands off him, pushing her away. Vivian stumbled and fell to the ground, landing hard on her backside. Her palms scraped against the gravel, leaving small cuts that stung. She winced in pain, tears welling up again. "Derek, how could you treat me like this? My hands are bleeding. It hurts," she whimpered, holding her injured hands up to him, hoping to elicit some sympathy. But Derek felt nothing. He simply stared at her coldly, devoid of any compassion. "Vivian, I've told you before. I don't love you. The one I love is Grace. Stop clinging to me. There is no future for us," Derek said, his tone icy and final. Ever since Derek discovered the deceit of Vivian and her son, Tommy, that fateful night, he had consciously started distancing himself from the two of them. But Vivian was relentless. She kept chasing after him, clinging to him at every turn. The most outrageous incident was when she brazenly stripped off her clothes and threw herself at him. Though he had driven her away, Vivian seemed utterly shameless, showing no sign of giving up. Soon enough she was back, entangling herself with him again. For the past year, Derek had been completely worn out by her persistence. So, the moment he found out where Gracie was, he hurried after her without hesitation. What he didn't expect was for Vivian to follow him there as well. "But you're divorced from Grace. She doesn't love you anymore. She doesn't want you." Vivian spat out her words bitterly, her tone sharp and unyielding. Derek's gaze darkened. "I'll find a way to win her back. She used to love me so deeply. If she left, it's only because she thought I didn't care for her. Once I show her how much I love her, she'll surely come back to me." He sounded more and more resolute, his determination evident in his voice. Vivian watched him, a mocking laugh escaping her lips as she realized there was no chance for her and Derek. "Huh? You? Love Grace? That's the biggest joke I've ever heard." Derek's face clouded with anger, but Vivian was unfazed. She sneered coldly. "If you truly loved Grace, how could you have abandoned her time and again to take care of me and Tommy?" "That's because I thought you genuinely needed help." Derek's voice faltered, a tinge of unease flashing across his face. Deep down, he knew his reasons were far from noble. He had been momentarily distracted, charmed by Vivian's gentle demeanor and soft words. But that wasn't something he would ever admit. "Huh? You've told that lie so many times you've even convinced yourself," Vivian taunted. "When Grace was still around, I threw myself at you plenty of times, and you didn't push me away then. You even pretended to accidentally touch my chest or my hips. Did you really think I didn't notice? Do you actually believe you're some kind of saint?" Derek's face flushed red with anger and shame. "Vivian, shut your mouth." His eyes darted around nervously, terrified that someone might overhear. "Do you honestly think you can win Grace back just like that?" Vivian scoffed. "Don't kid yourself. You think Grace is still the same woman who loved you with all her heart? She doesn't love you anymore." Vivian pressed on. "You're lying. Grace still has feelings for me. She's just mad and doesn't want to talk to me right now," Derek insisted, his voice trembling. "As long as I stay patient and prove myself to her, I can win her back." His eyes reddened with desperation. Vivian chuckled derisively. "Grace isn't coming back to you. Do you know why she pushed so hard for the divorce back then? Why she insisted you sign those papers that night and even threatened you? It's because she came to me beforehand. We planned it together. She asked me to show up at the right time and distract you, so you'd sign the divorce papers without a second thought." Derek felt like his mind had exploded. His vision blurred and he stumbled, struggling to stay on his feet. Grace had conspired with Vivian? She had orchestrated their divorce herself? Chapter 13. Grace held Marcus's hand as they walked toward the dormitory. Marcus looked down at their intertwined hands, a subtle yet undeniable smile forming on his lips. He subtly moved his fingers, lacing them through hers, locking their hands together. Grace noticed. Out of the corner of her eye, she glanced at him but pretended not to. When they reached the dormitory door, she calmly let go of his hand. With those two nuisances around, there's no way we'll enjoy a proper meal outside. I'll just cook some noodles here. Is that okay? Grace asked. That sounds perfect, Marcus replied obediently. The usually aloof and stoic Marcus transformed into a gentle, eager puppy in her presence. Even Grace herself often felt a pang of disbelief at the striking contrast. Since it wouldn't take long, Grace decided to let Marcus come inside while she cooked. She told him to wait patiently in the room, but Marcus refused. He insisted on standing by the kitchen door, watching her cook. You're amazing, Star. You even know how to cook noodles, Marcus said, showering her with praise. Grace rolled her eyes, amused. She glanced at him with a smirk. Not knowing how to cook noodles, what kind of useless person would that be? Marcus fell silent for a moment. Realizing he'd put his foot in his mouth, he quickly changed tactics. Your noodles smell especially delicious, Star. Just the aroma is making me hungry, he said, trying again. Grace added water to the pot and said coolly, I just fried 2 eggs and added water. I haven't even put the noodles in yet. What aroma are you talking about? Marcus looked at her aggrieved. Can't you just go along with me for once? Would it kill her to humor him a little? Grace raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. Not even a little. The expression on Marcus's face shifted instantly, his usual cold demeanor returning. With a long stride, he positioned himself directly in front of her. What now? Grace asked, exasperated. You're already divorced, and Star has made it clear she doesn't want to see you again. If you come here again, I'll have the guards arrest you for trespassing on a military base. Marcus's voice was cold, carrying an undeniable authority that filled the room. Derek opened his mouth to respond, but before he could say anything, Grace gently patted Marcus's arm. Don't get worked up. You'll pull at your wound. At her words, Marcus immediately softened, his imposing demeanor vanishing in an instant. Fine. I just don't want him bothering you anymore, Marcus said with a frown. I know. Let me handle it. Grace stepped out from behind Marcus, her expression hardening as she turned to face Derek. Why are you here again? Didn't we already make everything clear? She asked impatiently. Her tone toward Marcus and Derek was worlds apart, and Derek could feel it. His face darkened, his voice strained as he asked, Vivian told me that you went to her, that you personally tricked me into signing the divorce papers. Is that true? Yes, it's true, Grace admitted without hesitation. She had done it, and she saw no reason to deny it. Derek's face turned even paler, as if the last shred of his pride had been stripped away. He seemed to grow enraged, pointing a shaking finger at Marcus. So, the real reason you wanted a divorce was because of him, wasn't it? You've been cheating on me this whole time, haven't you? Vivian was just your excuse, wasn't she? You. Slap. Before Derek could finish his sentence, Grace's hand landed hard across his face. The sharp sound echoed in the tense air. Derek's ears buzzed, and his cheek burned as if it had been split open. Slowly, he turned his head to look at Grace, disbelief written all over his face. He had never imagined that Grace would hit him. Grace's face was cold and unyielding. Derek, don't assume everyone is as disgusting and vile as you and Vivian. A man who's married but still flirts and fools around with other women. Completely shameless. A woman who knows the man is married but still pretends to be pitiful and weak to seduce him. I didn't expose you too because I found it nauseating and didn't want to waste my time on you. But if I had ripped the mask off, the ones who'd be humiliated would only be the two of you. From the moment we got married, I cut off all contact with Marcus. The only reason we reconnected was because of a classified mission. Now we work in the same unit. During the entire time I was married to you, I never crossed any boundaries. Believe me or not, I don't care. And let me make this clear, we're divorced. I'm single now. Even if I were to date someone, get married again, or have children, it has nothing to do with you. You have no right, no position to question me. Grace finished, casting Derek a look of pure disdain. She couldn't help but wonder how blind she must have been to ever fall for someone like him. I've said what I needed to say. Now leave before I make you. Without sparing another glance at Derek, Grace turned and headed to the kitchen to cook. You still haven't left? Marcus growled when he noticed Derek hadn't moved. His eyes were sharp and unyielding. Derek didn't respond. He just stood there, silently watching Grace as she busied herself in the kitchen. It didn't take long for Grace to finish cooking. She scooped the noodles into a bowl and carried it to the dining area. Forget about him. Come eat, Grace said to Marcus, completely ignoring Derek's presence as she walked past him. Grace, is there really no chance for us anymore? Derek finally spoke, his voice hoarse and trembling, as if he were on the verge of tears. Grace didn't pause for even a second, nor did she respond. Seeing this, Marcus couldn't help but smirk. Get lost, Derek. You're nothing but an eyesore. With that, Marcus followed Grace inside and slammed the door shut behind him. Grace frowned at him. Did you really have to slam the door that hard? If it breaks, you're fixing it. Fine, I'll fix it, Marcus replied immediately. From now on, if anything breaks in this house, leave it to me. Grace shot him a sidelong glance. Just eat your noodles. I'm hungry. Marcus nodded and quietly began eating, content to drop the subject. Neither of them paid any attention to whether Derek was still standing outside. Instead, they chatted casually as they ate, their voices light and relaxed. Outside, Derek stood motionless, listening to the faint sounds of their conversation and occasional laughter. The pain in his chest was unbearable, but he couldn't bring himself to leave. It was only then that he finally accepted the truth. Grace was truly done with him. There was no way to win her back. His heart felt hollow, the despair consuming him entirely. Derek didn't know how to describe the agony he felt. Lost and broken, he eventually turned and walked away, his steps heavy and aimless. When Grace finished eating and went to wash the dishes, the hallway outside was empty. Without the sight of someone so revolting, Grace found herself in a much better mood, even humming softly as she cleaned up. Marcus leaned against the doorframe watching her. Looks like Star has completely let go of him. What else did you expect? Did you think I'd still have feelings for someone like that? Grace raised an eyebrow, her tone half teasing as she looked at him. I was a little worried before, but not anymore, Marcus admitted with a small smile. Grace rolled her eyes at him. When it came to relationships, his emotional intelligence was clearly lacking. She didn't even have the energy to correct him. Marcus hesitated for what felt like an eternity before finally asking, So Star, are you ready to embrace a new relationship? Grace lifted her gaze at his words, her eyes clear and emotionless. His heart skipped a beat. Marcus suddenly found it hard to breathe, his voice catching in his throat. Chapter 14. After a long pause, Marcus forced himself to speak again, his voice strained. Star, you're not going to let that scumbag Derek ruin your faith in love, are you? You're not planning to give up on relationships and marriage entirely, are you? Please no. Don't do this to him. He had waited so long, waited for her to leave that disastrous marriage, waited for her to walk out of that mess, so he could step in and finally be the one for her. If she locked her heart away, what was he supposed to do? For a moment, Marcus felt an overwhelming wave of despair rise up in him, so much so that he almost wanted to cry. He quickly pulled himself together and pressed on. Star, Derek is nothing but a scumbag. Don't let him occupy any space in your heart. There are still plenty of good men out there. Grace couldn't help but chuckle at how flustered he looked, as if he were about to catch fire. Feigning seriousness, she tilted her head slightly. Oh? Like who? Like me. Marcus's eyes lit up with a mix of hope and determination. What do you think of me? You already know everything about me. Among our peers, I'm definitely one of the best catches. We get along so well at work. Maybe we'd do just as well in life together. What do you think? Grace frowned, her expression one of mock distress. Ah, but don't you think that's a bit much? We already work together and cooperate so well. If we were to date and even get married, wouldn't that mean we'd be stuck with each other all the time? Sure, your face is nice to look at, but seeing it all the time would get old. Better not. Marcus felt as though he'd just been punched in the gut. He nearly spat up metaphorical blood. So much for the saying proximity breeds opportunities. Was he actually being rejected because he was too close? Panicking, Marcus quickly countered. How could you get tired of me? Think about it. If we're together, you'd have complete oversight of my work and personal life. You'd always know what I'm up to, and you'd never have to worry about me cheating on you. Doesn't that sound great? Grace pretended to consider this, her brows relaxing slightly. You make a good point. And besides, I have so much going for me. Once this research project is successfully completed, the higher-ups are planning to promote me. My rank will be higher than Derek's ever was. In the future, when he sees you, he'll only be able to look up to you. You'll be able to crush him effortlessly. Marcus tried his best to sell himself. Grace nodded. You're right about that. No matter what Marcus said, Grace agreed with him. But she refused to give him the answer he was hoping for. Marcus kept talking until his throat felt dry, yet Grace remained as calm and unyielding as ever. Finally, he clenched his teeth, deciding to lay all his cards on the table. The most important thing is, I love you. He grabbed her shoulders, leaning down to meet her gaze, his voice low and earnest. Star, I've loved you since the first time we met. Over time, that love only grew deeper. I've loved you for so many years. You have no idea how it felt when you came to me all excited and told me you liked Derek, that you wanted to marry him. I thought my heart was going to shatter into pieces. I couldn't stop you. I didn't want to see you sad or resentful. So I let you go, even though it killed me inside. Star, I've already lost you once. From the moment you married him, I felt like a walking corpse. It wasn't until a year ago, when you showed up again and told me you were divorced, that I felt alive again. Star, please. Just give me a chance to pursue you. I won't let you down. I won't be anything like Derek. By the time Marcus finished, his eyes were rimmed red with emotion. But Grace's expression remained unchanged, calm as ever, her gaze steady as she looked at him. Marcus felt his heart sink further and further. Finally, he released her shoulders and let out a bitter laugh. I'm sorry, Star. I lost control there. Forget what I just said. Let's go back to how things were. Before he could finish, Marcus froze. Grace had grabbed his collar, pulling him down. She stood on her toes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was fleeting, light as a dragonfly skimming the surface of water. It came and went so quickly that Marcus barely had time to register the warmth of her lips. All right, I'll say yes, Grace said. What did you just say? Marcus asked, stunned. Let's file the marriage application. Once it's approved, we'll get our marriage license. With that, Grace turned and went back to her room, shutting the door behind her. Marcus stood there dumbfounded. The next moment, he felt an uncontrollable surge of joy welling up inside him, making him want to jump for joy. Don't move around too much, Grace's voice came from behind the door. If you tear your stitches, it'll delay the wedding. Marcus forced himself to tamp down his excitement and quickly replied, Got it. Then he rushed back to his dorm, rummaging through drawers and cabinets in a frenzy. The paper and pen for the marriage application were right on his desk. What he was looking for now were his household registration booklet and other necessary documents. Listening to the chaos from the next room, Grace leaned against her door and smiled silently. Her life may have taken a detour, leading her down a painful and difficult path. But perhaps, just perhaps, she had finally found her way back. But fortunately, she possessed the resolve of a warrior cutting ties and the courage to start anew. Marcus's years of silent admiration, his quiet devotion over the past year, and his subtle yet heartfelt confessions, she couldn't possibly remain indifferent now that she was aware of them. Her heart wasn't made of stone. She was willing to give them both a chance, to nurture his long-held affection, to help it blossom and bear fruit. She thought perhaps it wouldn't be so bad. After all, Marcus had always treated her with utmost respect, and never once tried to manipulate her with his devotion. For that alone, she believed it was worth a try. She had faith that brighter days and happiness still lay ahead.